Okay. Well, when we get to AI enhanced decision making or applications or radiographic images, do we then privilege our hospitalists, our emergency room physicians, when they're doing handheld ultrasound with AI support? How do I know that and to your point, that it didn't look, we believe it doesn't hallucinate. We believe it doesn't have errors in it. But are you trained to recognize pattern failure? So I don't know if you have thoughts on this
Yeah,
privilege. And yeah,
I
go ahead.
absolutely do. And actually, our guidance covers it. I kind of skipped over it. Is how was it trained? Is really one of the elements.
911, what's your emergency?
Hello, and welcome to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. I'm your host, Lee Scheinbart, and this podcast brings you the hottest and most crucial conversations in healthcare and physician leadership. Today's show is brought to you by Belly AI, an AI-powered gut health app that helps you understand how food impacts feelings of bloating and discomfort. With features such as food analysis, personalized insights, and daily improvement tracking and planning, Belly AI makes it easy to track your patterns and to take control of your belly. As a lifelong patient managing Crohn's disease myself, I can honestly say that this app is a game changer. Download it today on the App Store, Belly AI. Our guest today is William Walders, the Executive Vice President and Chief Digital and Information Officer for Joint Commission. In this role, he leads the vision for Joint Commission's enterprise-wide digital transformation that includes the development and execution of information technology and business applications for the Joint Commission International, and the National Quality Forum. With over 25 years of technology leadership experience across healthcare, government, and engineering sectors, Mr. Walders has significant expertise in IT strategy, data management, and digital transformation, having served as Senior Vice President and CIO at Baycare, and prior to that, as CIO at Health First. A U.S. veteran, Mr. Walders began his career with the U.S. Navy, working with military hospitals and health systems around the world. He retired from active duty after 22 years of distinguished service. Mr. Walders earned his master's in health and business administration from the University of Florida and his bachelor's in information systems from the University of Maryland. The Joint Commission's participation in today's presentation, as sponsored by the Fire Chief Podcast, is on a non-exclusive basis. This is not an endorsement of the sponsor's products, nor a statement that its expertise or services are superior to those of other comparable companies. The Joint Commission, as a matter of policy, does not endorse products or companies. William, given all that information, it is really appropriate that we are hosting you as an information officer today. And not only that, you are my former coworker and pal, and it is very cool that I can do this today. So, William, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Scheinbart. And well, I don't think I've heard my entire bio read back to me. That's the first.
You may never want to hear it again, but we'll be happy to promote it on your behalf. That's cool. So, hey, when you and I worked together, we were experiencing tremendous changes, particularly sort of the early notions at our health system of that digital front door.
Yeah.
And, a lot of years have passed, and I don't think time has been forgiving whatsoever. The pace of technology within all healthcare organizations is like what you and I went through was the Stone Age, and we may still be in the horse and buggy age. What do you think about the pace of technology in general, and in particular with your work and responsibilities at the Joint Commission?
Yeah, I think the pace of technology is multivariate, right? So you'll remember we both lived through COVID at that health system, and you heard me say it. I think this was the best thing that ever happened to our digital transformation strategy, right? We went from, it was 1,000 in-person visits a day at the ambulatory facility, the medical group practice, to 1,000 virtual visits when we shut the doors. But then there's a testament to that and a tale. I can't speak for that health system specifically, but I can speak for the industry trends. We went from, in essence, forced 100%, that's probably naive, 90-ish% of virtual visit adoption to now 17% ubiquitously across ambulatory care. So the demand signal tends to be the patients want to come back to the office. They want to sit in the waiting room and read 3-year-old magazines and wait for the doctor to see them, 80% of the time, right? And so, technology changes in healthcare based off demand signal, right? COVID was that demand signal to get virtual visits, to get virtual waiting, a lot of innovations that have persisted. Automation, there's headwinds and financial changes as a result of that, right? That were, ancillary that forced us to be smarter with automation and other tools. And right now, it happens to be AI, automation, machine learning, robotic process automation, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll see that, I think, whatever the biggest issue is, how can it be solved with technology is often where we start. And so it kind of waxes and wanes, right? And I feel like, in particular, we've had this significant slope of adoption and interest. There's an advisory and consulting firm that calls this a hype cycle, and then the slope of disillusionment, where you start to think AI is going to, or technology is going to solve all your problems, and then you kind of get to this trough of disillusion. Okay, it isn't, and then this peak of enlightenment. And to be specific on technology, in particular AI, I think one of those, implemented in our tenure as well is ambient, right? So this idea of ambient listening in multiple settings started in primary care. It's now expanded to emergency department and even further now into med surg wards, where we thought it was going to drive great productivity, improve access, add a couple appointments a day to a physician's schedule. It turns out it doesn't. But what it does do is reduce administrative burden, and you're having, a lot of these probably from my cold dead hand moments from clinicians who are like, recognize, the millions of dollars investment we made didn't give us the RVU or access wins, but certainly gave us more pajama time. If you look back, I was trying to think of something, there's no more transformational or ubiquitous technology in healthcare right now than artificial intelligence. And if I look back and try to make a parallel to other technologies, even healthcare in general, as to what has had this impact, we thought blockchain might do it. Everybody was buzzy on blockchain. The big one in healthcare was going to be for credentials. Folks like you, Lee, you want to go to Georgia to practice, you want to go to, neighboring states in Florida, it would just all be on a common ledger and your credential. No, it didn't work, right? Like everybody tried, it didn't work. The states still have their process, et cetera, et cetera. So then I go back further. It's probably the internet. It's probably the telephone. It's probably, these large milestone events that became transformational. And to pivot us to, I think, which will be a large portion of our conversation this morning, AI is that. So,
look, this because you and I have talked about this. The medical staff are grinding it out, and the fact that they still have to file their credentialing application analog, that they just throw their hands up and say, yeah, whatever technology you have, I've been through this before. Right. And so they are disillusioned before they ever get enlightened, and they stay disillusioned to an extent. But ambient architecture may be the first time in 10, 15, 20 years where they actually feel that real impact, where that burden of that extra click and that extra work is somehow lifted marginally and then hopefully exponentially, and they get back to what it is that they are there for, and then get excited about how tech helps them care for patients. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I want to ask you a little bit about how you have been involved in developing the Joint Commission's guidance around responsible AI, because that's what you and I need to talk about. And I know you have spent some energy around the white paper. I'll phrase it as that. Tell us how you got involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do call it our guidance. It's 9 succinct pages if you were to download it, and it's certainly available on our website. And I have a very succinct slide I use as part of our speakers bureau engagements. So you'll find Dr. Kerlin, amazing human, our CEO, realized when he got here 3 years ago, he was going to make some changes, really, and leaning into this idea of augmenting, enabling, really doing what our mission states out is to really affirm the highest quality and safest healthcare, right? And then he started to see that AI was becoming more and more prevalent, and recognize and in his partnership, if you know the history of the Joint Commission, it's the joint for a reason. There are 7 affiliated entities that came together and said, we need an agency like that: American Hospital Association, Surgical Association, et cetera, right? And so he was getting these inquiries, pressures as the authority of healthcare quality and safety. What are you doing around AI, right? And so he's like, we got to do something. Simultaneous to that, he was reshaping his leadership team to have people who actually were operators who came from health systems. If you look at our leadership team now, it's not a single one of us who didn't spend a decade plus in a health system, right? And that's important. So from an IT lens, having spent, 1 years now, like this is actually the first time that I don't have an office where I have to walk through a healthcare entity to get to it. And so, this idea of being disconnected from the mission, we're not, right? And so staying connected. Recognizing this expertise across all these domains, you'll see it in other areas around standards, around compliance, around operations, around process improvement, quality. Naturally, we've got an amazing chief strategy officer, chief operating officer now. He was our chief innovation officer from the Cleveland Clinic, who's written books on quality, Dr. Jim Molino, et cetera. Anyway, all that to say, recognize we need a bench to do this. He picked me in essence, and so one of the first charges I had, I've been here 14 months now, was to do exactly what you referenced, is we need to build something to help our health systems understand AI. Thankfully, our amazing operations standards and our government affairs team was connected to this. They have the bulk of this done. I just came in as the IT guy and put IT words into it. And so in partnership with those entities, and then we leveraged third-party counsel to help us with the legal words and aspect of it. We published that in June. It really gets after 7 key themes, and I'll go through them at a really quick pace here. Have a governance structure, right? Have something, right? And you see a lot of shoulds in there, right? We want it to be democratic. We want to democratize AI. So, the large health systems of which you and I have been adjacent to and worked at, they probably got this figured out. They probably already have a governance structure, right? And maybe we can help them. We missed that thing at Joint Commission reference, or we intentionally did. But think about the rural hospitals. Think about, the thousands of other healthcare organizations domestically and globally. We're a global organization that don't know where to start, right? So an AI is going to be a great equalizer. It will, by a forced function, democratize healthcare. So we want it to be democratic. We want it to be ubiquitously applied. So general guidance, right? And then within that, you should cover six things. What are you doing with data? What do you do with safety? When AI hallucinates, how do you report it? No different than any other serious reportable event. Is there bias in it? Do you understand that bias? Do you check these things? You're monitoring the tools. Do you teach on it? Everywhere I've been, regardless of your tenure as a physician, we force you to sit in a room, virtually or physically, and learn the EMR for 1 to 14 days, depending on if you're new to practice, right? Why is that? Because things are a little different here. Where we're here is, here's the order set, here's what that is, and here's technology. I think it's overly naive to throw an AI tool in the environment and not teach on it in a similar way, right? You just got to pivot and change the process, And so to that end, now clinicians, vet, Gemini, they're always looking at it to understand it's the standard of care. They're always adapting, always changing, and it just happens to be in that tool. There's a lot of security controls we can go into if you care to understand. It's called landed. It's only in their environment. It's not going to Google public, right? It is no different than if they built it themselves.
Yeah, listen, we're going to stay on governance for just a moment because I think so. Our audience is worldwide. I mean, we have listeners from the Netherlands, from the UK, from Ireland, quite a bit from Australia. So there may be systems that are still slow to sort out what they need to do. And as you and I know here in the United States, there's the haves and the have-nots. So the bigger systems are moving forward, and medium systems are probably still in their infancy, and the other systems are just now beginning to understand what we're talking about. It's just the nature of it. But AI governance, if we come back to that, and there's lots of different use cases, but what I want to dive into for just a second is that clinical support tool that AI can bring to the environment of care. And do we want to believe that AI governance is at the medical staff level, at the MEC, in the bucket of peer review and credentialing, and or that clinical decision support? So, for example, somebody somewhere in the health system says, I have this great tool that's going to help us with this part of a heart and vascular disease. Where does that fit in, and how do we apply that, and who governs that is a decision maker that won't hurt people, or that will help our quality of care, or that we can address it in peer review? So the question is, Is AI governance at clinical decision support at a medical staff level or somewhere else, in your opinion?
Yeah, you're going to get the both answer, and I'll
Go for it.
yeah, and so it's absolutely both, right? I mean, these tools are powerful. These tools have overarching support service ramifications to legal, to HR, to technology, right? So you've got to have a support service element, but no different than buying a Da Vinci robot, right? Like I've got to be involved as the IT guy, supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. We bought the thing. Here you go, doc. I trust you to use it, right? Et cetera, train on it, do all those things. And when it breaks, needs a patch, whatever, call me. Or, a lot of these are in the cloud too. So you got to provide a connection. And so that's similar here. So from procurement, understanding of risk, all of those things, it's governed at the support service level in partnership with clinicians. And I've taken many of these through this process, some through FDA approval on sepsis for AI and other things, right? And it's a long journey. And you'll see in tools like that, there's actually a great MIT study that says 90% of them don't go live, right? They build up all this thing and then only 2% actually cross the line, which is an interesting statistic. It's a myriad of reasons to why we're getting at some of them here is that lack of partnership, lack of understanding. You fall in love with the thing. It's only physician led. It's only support service led. It has to be a partnership. And so once it's employed, it's monitored by the support service and then governed by the clinical staff if it's a clinical tool, right? To the point where, healthcare changes every day. Right? And you accept or ignore, or I shouldn't say accept, you accept or deny whatever change that might be. If there's a new way to do X, you vet it, you follow the clinician governance structures. We say, hey, this new way to do a thing exists. It's suture, spine, whatever, right? In your case, heart and valve. I'm doing a TAVR. There's a slightly different way. Do we do it here or not? Great. So the AI tools are no different. In that case, it's going to map the heart. It's going to give you whatever it is. You say, is this real? Is it? We vet it, and then we implement it, right? I'm not, no support service technically involved in that until I got to go update a thing. So we got to contract it a little differently, potentially, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a both. You govern it through the normal process, and that's important. You can't just, let everybody have the front door of AI tools that, hit an organization ubiquitously, even though they will. There's thousands of them. And you've got to partner with staff. I've got a real world example here. We were doing one with incidental findings of radiology, and we added 7 of them, right? 7. And I'll tell you, we had one that was amazing for heart, actually, for ultrasounds or whatever. Hey, you didn't follow up when you said you would in 2 years, simple things like that, as far as saying, oh my gosh, you've got an issue with the valve, go fix it, right? And then one that was good for everything, right? Like fill in the blank. Every type of imaging imaginable. And so we ended up picking the one for everything, right? And that was a clinical decision. Even though the cardiologists wanted the other thing, we picked it and then eventually built, and then eventually that company caught up to the capabilities of it. But, that's how it was governed. What was interesting, and I think why support services absolutely need to be involved, is one of its functions was looking back at free text notes and saying every CT, every MR, every follow-up, every incidental, whatever, it didn't. And now suddenly we got a 2-year backlog in imaging because we got to go tell those people because the AI found it that, hey, we should follow up here. Or did you, right? Maybe you did outside of the walls of that organization. So that's why it's a both. There's some clear and obvious reason why that partnership needs to exist.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I guess I'm biased because I was very comfortable working when you and I worked together and we had the clinical council and the strategy council and the ops council. It was a great forum for that back and forth and pushback and conversation until we all agreed this is the right tool for our system, whether it's a robot or something else. But what I fear, and it's just my paranoia, that the medium systems that haven't gotten their arms around this aren't thinking the way. So I'm going to go off on a tangent. Sure. I'm going to share what I'm thinking. So when the guys and the girls want to go ahead and begin TAVR or laparoscopic hysterectomy, then we at the MEC and the credentialing, we have to determine, has that physician earned the right to conduct that privilege in this hospital? Did you go learn where did you learn? How many cases did you learn on? And you know where I'm going. Yeah. And so, and we take a very well-known GYN surgeon who has never worked on the robot. Everything was open. You've got to go learn how to work on that because you're going to get feedback. You're going to get rapid real-time information. The haptics are going to be new to you, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Well, when we get to AI enhanced decision making or applications or radiographic images, do we then privilege our hospitalists, our emergency room physicians, when they're doing handheld ultrasound with AI support? How do I know that and to your point, that it didn't look, we believe it doesn't hallucinate. We believe it doesn't have errors in it. But are you trained to recognize pattern failure? So I don't know if you have thoughts on this
Yeah,
privilege. And
I
go ahead.
absolutely do. And actually, our guidance covers it. I kind of skipped over it. Is how was it trained is really one of the elements. And this actually came up on a great panel at the National Cancer Institute I did, and one of the clinicians referenced this, and it escaped me to not think of it. When you get a new clinician, you nailed it. You either ask or you look, where did you train, right? And she said something akin. She happened to be at Brigham, and I think she was breast or oncology or something. And she said, yeah, if I saw Dr. Jones, I know it was fine. Yeah, absolutely, good to go. Like, start tomorrow. Like, I know where you were trained, right? I mean, obviously it's a little more rigorous than that, but you got to start asking the AI, where were you trained, right?
Right.
You've got to see that equivalent, Cleveland Clinic, if it's heart, if it's Sloan Kettering, if it's oncology, like, where were you trained? But I'll caveat, there's a bias to that. So you may remember an oncology AI platform from 10 years ago. I'll call them out in a sense. They've certainly modernized since then, but Watson for oncology was ubiquitous.
Yes. Yeah. Remember it so well.
And so that came out in 2013. Do you know why it didn't stick? Because it was trained at Sloan Kettering, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, like, great. But then the problem was it treated every oncology patient like a last mile oncology journey, right? It's like, oh my God, you need, clinical trials, you're stage 5 already. Like, no, I'm not. I've just got a simple thing, right? But the AI is trained in like the highest acuity, most complex environment, and it treats every patient like it's a last month's on patient. So yes, short answer, right? You've got to ask for that thoroughness. You've got to ask where it's trained. You've got to vet it. But boy, think about medical devices, right? So you mentioned ultrasounds. It's been the wild west for medical devices because there's just so many, right? And they're right. These AI tools may or may not be, and that's a decision that others will make inside the government, et cetera. And I think components of it will. But that ultrasound's a great example. I didn't radiate the patient so much and rendered an AI image because of it is kind of where we're seeing radiology going, right? Is like, let's not expose them to so much. And it's a simple thing. We know what it is. Let's look, okay, broken bone, great. I'll render the image in a way I think is appropriate, right? Because AI. Right. And so that's different, right? That is suddenly, and how do you know that's true or not, right? Is where that's going to take some process and rigor, and that's why the governance is in place. And until such time, and you've got to play whack-a-mole with this. And these exist. That ultrasound exists today. I'm trying to remember the name of one, and it was just handed to people in many organizations. Right. And they're sitting in the ED, zooming around, right? So.
This is a conundrum where these so-called small handheld, easy to use, portable things, we just hand them to people with a day of in-service training. Good to go. You've been in service, check the box. And I think we need to be a little bit more thoughtful about.
And that's where the clinical and decision making is. I mean, you've got books behind you. Every physician I've ever met. If I could automate those books, your life would be easier. You look at it like, okay, that's a data element, right? No different than an ultrasound is. I've got to know that ultrasound is doing something, and I use my position influence. I'll never forget here, having Crohn's gastroenteritis, presenting the ED for the first time I ever had that. I was going under in minutes for appendectomy, right?
I remember this.
Everything presented as such, and then I think should remember his name. Like, had the wherewithal to be like, we should probably image, right? Like everything I was doing, everything said appendix, appendicitis. And he looks at, oh gosh, no. Like, you've got
other side.
So it happened to be, I think, whatever it was, but everything was on the right quadrant sides, et cetera, from where I was presenting pain, et cetera, et cetera. I literally called, as a single dad, got my kid taken care of to get picked up from school. I was going under the knife, and then we did a CT, and it's like, oh my God, you got low bowel inflammation, something else going on here. And but that was physician judgment and understanding based off the tools they had, right? And so it's no different.
Yeah. That's a good example. Unfortunately, it was your personal health and well-being, but it's a good example nonetheless.
I mean, it
You know,
probably wouldn't hurt much to get my appendix out, but certainly not the right.
yeah. It was the old, where's William today? He just
Yeah,
had
that's right.
procedure.
Thankfully,
No
I
big deal.
remember getting that call from Steve, and I was literally like in waiting room for that CT or MR,
Yeah.
but it's probably
Yeah.
CT. Yeah.
So we're going to pivot in just a moment, but I want to stick with this governance idea, and I agree with you. It's sort of multi-layered. The support services, you've got the medical staff input. You come into terms with what it is and who's going to be privileged to use it, and how are they trained on it, so on and so forth. But then we've got the board of trustees, and again, we make a recommendation up to the board that, Dr. So-and-so is now privileged to do TAVRs at our institute or, mitra clips or whatever we're going to do. And at some point, I think systems are going to have to recognize that boards need to be educated. They may come from different walks of life where they're using AI, banking, financing, any number of backgrounds. But AI and health, they're going to need to understand what it is that they are signing off on, because that ultimate authority, as you know, with the Joint Commission, rests with the board. We at the physician level make that recommendation, but we require the board to approve. So they're going to need that education. Have you been involved in any of these types of discussions?
Yeah, in regards to educating boards on AI,
Mm-hmm.
I have it.
And the role of credentialing and privileging
Yeah.
it within the clinical use scenario.
Yeah, and I have in prior rules. It's our charge as the senior IT leader in an organization. I would say our guidance is that's implied that you would educate your board, you educate other stakeholders, other decision makers. I would venture to say it's a bit of a blind spot probably for most. I can't attest to what occurs in boardrooms. Boards are a governing entity, right? And so in reaching into this level of detail, many are. And so I think it depends on system. And if you look at a lot of I love kind of parallels, and certainly parallels in my lens. If you're a for-profit company or health system, you had a couple things you had to do from an IT perspective now, SEC filings, et cetera, on cyber, right? So the IT person, the cyber person is often far more involved in boards. Some they're not. I think they're going to now, if you're for-profit, you're already there. You're going to talk about AI. You're going to talk about some of that. I think now the boards are starting to get more interest, starting to understand some of that risk. And so it's really situational, but I think it's an inevitable one where they certainly have interest. They want to know what you're doing with AI.
So that's very helpful when we think about how boards require a certain degree of involvement in education. It definitely helps us understand the whole vertical process of something as new as AI. Although it's probably no different than any other technology, as we talked about at the beginning of the show. It's just making sure we're not leaving that to randomness and making sure the board is educated.
Yeah,
So,
I would only add
go ahead.
every major technology, right? I think, there wasn't board briefs on blockchain. I don't want to be overly naive, but there certainly was on the internet. There certainly was on Y2K. There certainly was on some of these the cloud probably, right? Like I see these, AI is that, right? This really once in a decade shot in the arm of high potential, high efficiency. So.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about one more issue relative to the medical staff. Then I have a very key question after that. Do you believe, or do you know, or do you have thoughts relative to the role of AI in augmenting and adjudicating the peer review? So we're talking about using tools and taking care of patients. But how do we deploy AI technology into those quality committee reviews to say, this physician is not just one standard deviation, but two or three, and we really need to create some quality improvement pathways. Any experiences relative to this?
None, but boy, I think this is an amazing use case because you and I know how it's done. This modern data and advanced analytics, you're pulling stuff from the EMR. I think AI is going to could greatly expedite that process. In fact, I've never thought of this or even seen a technology to do this. I think it's something you could build relatively quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something that isn't in the pipeline of one of the EMR providers.
Well, right now, there are folks that I know that I've talked to that are doing this on the ambulatory side without some of the governance models relative to hospitals, acute care, and long-term care facilities, like you and I are talking about, and they're doing chart extraction. So it's old-fashioned, right? It's chart review, but in the hands of a tool that can do it at large scale and identify gaps in care, gaps in documentation, clearly missing the same thought again and again about, okay, that hemoglobin A1C is X, but it should be Y, but you keep missing this gap to drive it, notwithstanding patient compliance or ability to follow. That is happening, and it's probably just a matter of time, as you say before. And perhaps the big systems are already working behind the scenes right now
to
bring that.
We started a partnership, just thought partnership with an entity who's looking to do that for standards. So similarly, and then very prescriptive around cardiac care, right? Kind of here's the steps, the pathways, if you will, to success. But this idea of peer review, M&Ms, that kind of thing, was done. I've built these in the past, predictive models, data stuff, right? Where I'm just, and here's the input to it. You're transparent about it, and it helps folks like your audience, in which this podcast is largely targeted to, explain it, understand it, and it's a coaching tool. It's one of many elements, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to state. It's a great coaching and training tool. And again, maybe at reappointment, I'm throwing some ideas to you at the Joint Commission. Maybe as part of reappointment, you're doing some, so it's not just sitting for your boards and doing the maintenance of certification, but you're doing some internal retraining, just like a pilot has to do every time they apply again for their license renewal. Same concept.
Love that.
Yeah. All right. So here's the last key element, right? Here we are in real time. Last couple of weeks, OpenAI's Chat Health, Anthropic's Cloud Health in the past couple of weeks. And now we're going to go from a physician-facing, system-facing to patient-facing. People are going to have these large amalgamations of data, this portable health information. They're going to bring it to the emergency room, bring it to the clinic in anticipation of a surgery or their belly is hurting, as in your case. So now what are systems going to do with this, how are we going to think about this from a system level?
Yeah, you have to partner with it. So you joked, it was Dr. Google, 10, 15 years ago, your patient shows up often with a printout, right? Hey, doc, here's what Google tells me. Tell me something different. Why here?
Now Dr. Google talks, acts, recommends, suggests.
And has empathy syntax in a way that resonates, right? I think these tools are great for loneliness as well as they're very convincing to that end, right? Where I now think, and truth be told, I'm guilty of it. I'll go on to these tools and be like, my supplements, my this, my that, and boy, are they convincing, and boy, are they often confidently wrong, right? And so, to that end, I think health systems need to partner with that end in mind. The front door of the hospital is shifting from Google or the web, right? And, we've spent tons of money on our digital presence, looking at digital front door. We covered that kind of some things we worked on in our prior dealings together. So now the front door is probably one of the tools you just referenced, right? It's some AI model, some et cetera. So you've got to embrace that. You've got to start providing tools and capabilities like that. A lot of health systems are. There's a great one, a dear friend of mine in New England who has embraced that, partnered with it. The front door of that health system will be an AI-like entity. It will eventually be in your home should you want it to. They're piloting those things. And no surprise, as a technologist, my home is entirely controlled by the speaker that sits to my right here. Blinds, air conditioning, et cetera, et cetera. Boy, loneliness too. I now have a chat to me occasionally. I've been piloting some things for veteran health and veteran loneliness. I love playing with this tool for. But yeah, why wouldn't you be allowed into the home if the patient wants to or not? And that. So health systems have to pivot to the front door being one of those tools, embracing that, understanding that. It'll be omni-channel, no different than, I referenced at the beginning of our podcast, the adoption rate of virtual visits only 17%. It won't be everybody. Some people still want to go, some people still want to call, some people still want to go to the web. But I think there'll be a momentum shift for any healthcare entity that the front door is that tool. It's curated by you. It's governed by you. You're going to have to build, understand, a workforce to allow it. You're going to have a lot of clinician involvement to know when a patient says X, the output is Y, and often just call 911 or call us maybe in some scenarios, or to use it as a caregiver. Imagine, God, you want that engagement. Imagine that patient who asks, I have cream in my coffee this morning. I have a surgery at 8:00. No, please don't. And you want to be able to control that. How about we say, we know you have a surgery. and all those things that live. The peri-op seems to be the biggest opportunity, I think, for this in pre-surgery, post-surgery, et cetera, et cetera. And just the sky's the limit for health systems embracing tools like this to really engage the patient. And you and I both know that is the critical path for healthcare, right? The patient engagement, patient advocacy, they own their journey, they understand.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree, and I've been seeing hints at this concept that the front door just moved. So this isn't like I want to be scheduled when I want to be scheduled, or I want to find a provider within a few miles.
I could build that easy.
Sort of yesterday's
those are table stakes now.
Yeah, but now it's I want a provider who specializes in aortic valves because my brother had it. Now I bet I have it. And Google, and ChatGPT and Cloud all told me, right? So now it becomes almost exponential, and the bandwidth and the support system to wrap around, because they're not coming to knock on the door with a package. I mean, they're bringing the whole moving van up, and they got to unload all of that into the health system funnel to get to that place that they need to be. So I think that's going to be a challenge, given margins are low and all the other pressures that are happening. So you and I are here to support and make those things.
Those headwinds are real, right? I mean, you go into the litany of the payer provider pressures, the government reimbursement changes, 340B potential changes, et cetera, et cetera. There's the headwinds in healthcare are taking down margin right now, right? From health systems, and they've got to find ways to get that back. And so, there's a business element to this that I often say, and I'll be brief. Find these tools, find them fast, get an ROI and TCO within some time domain that you're, ideally within a fiscal year, and your like CFO is going to say yes. But start getting those wins, find those things now, and AI is going to be that great enabler in this really turbulent time. I can tell you, status quo is not an option. Just sitting there and being a victim and saying, "Oh my gosh, the sky is falling on payer mix reimbursement, blah blah blah." You've got to lean into that and really find these efficiencies now.
Yeah. It's not an either or; it's a yes and totally. Yeah. And your thoughts are very insightful, William. I really want to thank you for being on the show. It's great to hang out with you. And some of those old war stories that we have are great to reminisce about. So you have been listening to the Fire Chief Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to the Chief Medical Officer. Once again, today's show was brought to you by Belly AI. Download it today on the App Store, Belly AI. Want to learn more about how to address AI governance at your facility? Take a look at what the Joint Commission has to say on the matter. William has presented this work, and it's out on the web for you to review. We'll put the link in the show notes. And if you want to learn more about it, go ahead and read it and bring it to your medical executive committee, to your administrative colleagues, and all the way to the board. If you want to learn how to lead as a chief medical officer, then check out our website, thefirechiefcmo.com, and connect with me on LinkedIn. I love talking with CMOs from all over the world. So get out there, be a good governor, be a good chief, be an intelligent leader. Whatever you do, in the words of Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, remember, let's be careful out there.